I joined a cult. Let's talk about it. Well, not me exactly. Well, I don't think so. But anyways, we're going to have a look at some people who joined cults, their experiences, and how maybe they got out. Before we start, let's have a look to see exactly what a cult is.
A cult can form around anything. Politics, religion, business, self-improvement, therapy, hate, aliens, meditation, YouTube channels, and eco-friendly lifestyles. Cults are not solely religious, and not all new religious movements or unorthodox groups are cults. Cult does not mean religion or group I don't like, but refers to a very specific structure and characteristics. Cults aren't about belief, they're about control. And to spot a cult, you just have to look out for these 3 characteristics. 1. A charismatic and authoritarian leader. Cult leaders always have 2 qualities: charisma and authoritarianism. A cult leader needs to have enough confidence, charm, and drive to pull people in, and they're always narcissists. Cult leaders like Jim Jones, Soko Ashihara, and Marshall Applewhite all fit at least 8 of the 9 criteria for people with narcissistic personality disorder. Their charisma and grandiose sense of self-importance attract people, but after that initial charm, their authoritarian nature and lack of empathy creates a culture of fear and terror, which keeps people in the cult.
I was in this church from age 13 until 23, so it was a good solid decade of my life. So the church that I was part of was known as ICOC, aka International Churches of Christ. Their whole thing is being international, so they have locations all over the US as well as in other countries, and they consider it all being under the umbrella of being one church. You might think to yourself, how can a random non-denominational church be a cult? Like, isn't that just like normal Christianity? Isn't that just a normal church you go to on Sundays? And so I've decided that I'm going to go over some of the hallmarks of what it was like to be a member, and you can be the judge of what you think of whether or not it is a cult or not. It's just very prescriptive and very controlling. As a visitor, something that you probably would experience is love bombing, meaning that if you came to church randomly on a Sunday, you would have like tens of people coming up to you being like, hey girl, like, how are you? What's your name? What do you do for a living? I'm so interested in everything about you. Can I get your number? Can I give you a hug? Do you want to study the Bible with me? They would just like really make you feel like they wanted you to be their friend, and there would be like this huge emphasis on wanting you to become a member. When I was in church, I never thought this was weird because I was a part of it, and I was always like, well, if someone's a visitor, you want them to feel welcome, so we should all go up to them and really, you know, make them see that we're different, like we're a family here. You want to be part of our family? You want to have friends? In general, ICOC was very obsessed with bringing in new members. There was a lot of lessons about sharing your faith, going out and talking to strangers. If you meet someone, you should invite them. When I was in the campus ministry in college, there was often a practice where they would encourage us to set a number goal of how many people we were going to share our faith with that semester. And so we were those really annoying people that would walk up to strangers on our college campus and be like, hey, do you believe in God? Like, do you want to come to a Bible discussion? Like, you want to like come study the Bible?
In the video, you heard her talk about love bombing. Now, love bombing is something that is used in relationships, but it's also used in religion and cults. So basically, love bombing is a coordinated effort, usually under the direction of leadership, that involves long-term members flooding recruits and newer members with flattery, verbal seduction, affectionate but usually non-sexual touching, and lots of attention to their every remark. So basically, they're wanting you to feel loved, needed, and wanted. You know, things that you might not be getting somewhere else or from someone else.
When I first moved to Canada, my parents made me join a Filipino cult because all their friends were in it and they were getting FOMO. It was called KFC, or Kids for Christ, and they were in CFC, which is Couples for Christ, but there's also SFC, which is Singles for Christ, and YFC for Youth for Christ, and that's for teenagers. This will come to you as a shock if you know me in real life, because my family is the furthest thing from religious. I grew up with a dad who was very much against the Roman Catholic Church. Went to an all-boys school that was run with priests, and he just did not have a good experience. At first, this was a great community. They helped us get settled. We were newcomers. They got us furniture, food. The only trade-off was that every Friday, my parents had to do Bible study, where they go to different houses, sit in a circle, and take turns reading Bible passages and then analyze it. My dad's sleeping through all of them. Then they started getting really controlling. Like they were monitoring everything that my parents were doing. They needed to be briefed on little things like why they were running late to a meeting, why did they have to leave early from a party, what we were me and my sister eating, just little random things like that. And I couldn't even trust the kids that I was in Kids for Christ with, because everything that I was telling them, they would tell their parents, who would then confront my parents about it. And I was a kid. I was like 11. It's not like I was doing anything sketchy. That's when I overheard them telling my parents that my sister and I were so behind on the teachings of the church and that we needed to catch up with all the other kids. Otherwise, we'd fall behind and essentially, long story short, go to hell. I don't know why my parents entertained it as much as they did, because they hated going to Bible study, but they ended up getting convinced to bring me and my sister to Bible camp for like 4 years. And that's like a whole other story. I talked to my other friends about surviving KFC.
Okay, the lesson here, do not join cults that have the same name as fried chicken places. Seriously.
You know, they wanted to keep us as close, as tight as possible, especially the women. Like, I think I've said this in another video, but it was just super oppressive for women. And they even controlled who we were allowed to be friends with inside the cult. So one time we were at a women's retreat and they passed out this pamphlet.
Talking about friends, and then so they want to do an illustration, got a little pegboard out from Cracker Barrel, and they begin to take out pegs, like you're a wife, you have a husband, you have care group. So there were like 3 pegs left, and they said, these are your friends. Now go home to your husband and ask your husband, who should your friends be? That's it.
He was going to pick 3 friends
Within the church,
that you could be friends with. He got to decide who your 3 friends were.
and all things that Jesus never even said. I mean,
Jesus had 12 friends at least.
I know, Cracker Barrel.
I highly recommend checking out this TikTok account. Their cult stories are unbelievable. They have multiple of them.
So a few people have asked us if we realized we were in a cult when we were in it. And the honest answer is, I think we were too effing tired to even know, because as women in this cult, you were just so tired. There's so many things on you constantly that you were responsible for and you had to do, and boxes you had to check. Mm-hmm.
Especially by the time you had 4 kids. So you're responsible. First of all, they had a 5 a.m. club.
All the women.
Women were supposed to get up at 5 a.m. and pray for their husbands. And one time I was just too tired. I didn't join it.
The husbands didn't have to wake up
No,
then.
they were sleeping.
Just the wives.
And I remember I didn't join it, and I got called by the pastor's wife asking why I did not join the 5 a.m. club.
Yeah, and then you had to homeschool your kids and take care of your house, and you know, you're constantly having babies and nursing these babies and making gourmet meals three times a day and cleaning your house and hosting care group
And discipling other women to come to your house and showing them how to do
and
things.
blowing your husband and can I say that?
Nobody else's husband.
And it's your responsibility if your husband watched pornography, because that means you weren't doing your job. It is also your responsibility if some random guy on the street lusted after you, because you were not doing your job, I guess, to protect him too. So everything was
You had to be attractive,
on the women,
but not too attractive. Just enough attractive.
and you had to greet your husband at the door louder than the dogs.
Yes.
You had to come running when he came to the door. And
The pastor's wife told us that one time, when your husband comes home, I want you to greet him louder than the dog. So we were regulated, is that a word? Anyway, we were reduced to a dog.
yeah,
Greeting
which
like a
is
dog.
like meeting someone at the door is a beautiful thing, but then and all those things were just, there were certain ways we
To-dos.
specifically had to do it. And yeah,
And the sad thing is, you never arrived. You never could check off the boxes and be like, oh, look, I've done it all. They were
going to add more things if you ever got close.
So
There
we're
was always
probably
more things.
too exhausted or too busy to ever know if we're in a cult. And by this time, you've got 4 kids, you're homeschooling, you're cut off from mainstream. And so where do you start? Where do you finally say, I'm putting these kids in school and I'm getting a job? I mean, there's just no place.
You can't do that.
There is no place to do that. So you just stayed in this cycle of trying to check off that list, baby.
That never got checked.
I'm happy to say that both of these beautiful ladies divorced their husbands and left that cult. And if a person or organization is trying to tell you how many friends that you are allowed to have, please, just as quickly as possible, turn around and walk away.
Okay, I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. I posted the last TikTok, which is not my normal content, but that I was in a cult. And it's true. Cult, pyramid scheme, whatever you want to call it. It was called, I can't believe I'm sharing all of this. but it was called Global Information Network. If you guys are familiar with Kevin Trudeau, he's a big conspiracy theorist, wrote books like Natural Cures, They Don't Want You to Know About, all this stuff. And I lived and breathed that shit forever. So basically when I joined, I was like guaranteed $10,000, which I did not get, typical pyramid scheme stuff. And it was just an information-based membership where you would pay to upgrade like each level. So I don't know, I think there was like maybe 12 levels. And you had to pay like thousands of dollars for each level, which I did. I literally spent my entire graduation money on joining. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you want to look up Global Information Network, there's articles and stuff about it. But we would like travel, we would do all this stuff, but it was like the ultimate toxic positivity hype group, and they praised Kevin Trudeau in this, like praised. It was wild. And I always felt like maybe a little off about it, like with the group and everything, but my dad was heavily involved in it, and I was a teenager, and then Matt and I got like Matt to join which is just all so cringe to me, but he was in it, and I met like some really great friends, and it's like kind of interesting to talk to them now. We all are kind of like, wow, waking up from it. We're like, ooh. There were some teachings that were really great and valuable, but nothing you can't learn from like a podcast or anything, honestly, or some books. But yeah, basically it was just an information-based membership. You had to pay to be in it, pay to like up level, and yeah, it honestly was an entire scam.
This sounds so much like Scientology, NXIVM, and I believe that Twin Flames is like this too. Basically, you pay to play. The more you pay, the higher you rank up and the more powerful you are within that organization. I highly doubt that Jesus would have ever wanted a church to basically profit off of you, you know, taking all of your money while you live in poverty so that church and then the people in the church who run the church can live a life of luxury. To me, that just doesn't sound very biblical or godly, but what do I know?
I grew up next to a cult, and I'm about to show you the pamphlets and cassette tapes that they distributed to their members. This cult is a modern cult in America that still exists in several states. It's called the Living Word, and it was created by John Robert Stevens in 1951 in California. I'm from a tiny mountain town in Colorado called Palmer Lake. And when I say I grew up next to them, they were literally across the road from me. As I tell you this story, I am going to show you the pamphlets and cassette tapes, only 1% of them because, as you can see, I have boxes filled. So they were being quarantined on their property for sexual abuse allegations. Surprise, surprise. And my friends and I decided to go look around in the abandoned buildings out there. And I did not think that what we found would be straight out of a movie. First, let's talk about the cassette tapes. Ba-bam! Do you see that? It says pastor approval only stamped on it. Do you want to know what it sounds like? That cassette tape has a recording of the leaders of this cult talking about John Robert Stevens' end. The end of the leader of the cult. They don't go into specifics of what that means, but I think we can guess. He died shortly after that cassette tape. Now after that, we explored the pamphlets. Here's an example of one. It says, "But I'm only 8 years old." They mailed these to their members across the nation. Oh, and here's another one. If you look in the top left corner of this photo, you'll see the date at which this pamphlet was sent out, which, if I'm reading correctly, that says 1978. Let's look at a few more, shall we? Spiritual cannibalism. Sounds fun, right? I don't want to know what this one's about. And as if you couldn't get culty enough, they might as well just stamp it on the front of this one. Can you drink the cup? Now this one terrifies me a little bit because it's slightly apocalyptic. Total discipleship will dominate the world. Sounds like they were hatching a plan. Now this next one I think is really interesting to talk about. The channel of the higher flow. So what they called leadership in this cult was the flow. And if you were part of the higher flow, you were part of the higher leadership. I'm ready to read these pamphlets because I definitely think that there is abuse going on in this cult and it should be outed. So let me know if you want to hear these pamphlets. This cult is still alive and well, and people have come forward. Ex-members of this cult have come forward with little to no avail. There's a mini documentary online, but not much else. I have so much more to share. There's going to be another video.
Definitely go check out her TikTok because she plays some of those tapes that she found from that cult. YouTuber Loey Lane has a video where she discusses those TikToks, plus she does a little deep dive into the cult. So I highly recommend you watch it, and I will link it in the description box below.
She claimed that her estranged husband operated a, quote, $40 million religious empire, and that his personal net worth was between $1 to $2 million. This was in the 70s, so listen to what I'm about to tell you, and then really think about how rich John Robert Stevens would be today in 2022. He had 5 houses in California, a vacation home in Hawaii, and a farm in Washington, Iowa. Funds provided by the church were used for trips to Monte Carlo, Europe, and the Bahamas. And the only source of income that John Robert Stevens had was through the church.
Loey does such a good deep dive. Again, I highly recommend you go watch that video, plus just listening to her. She has such a soothing voice.
After a bunch of deliberation, I have decided that it is my time to tell my story on how me and my family escaped the Yellow Deli cult, better yet known as the 12 Tribes community. Okay, I'll kind of start it off on how me and my family got involved in the group. I personally was born into it along with my 3 other siblings. I was in the group until I was 6 years old. However, my oldest brother was in the group until he was 12. And my parents were both brought into the group by their parents when they were very young, under the age of 10. A lot of the recruitment happened in the 70s when people were looking for a lot more to life and were looking to the hippie age, whatever. So the group, the 12 Tribes, would go to a lot of music festivals or festivals in general and would have booths and tents set up, really just advertising a better communal way of life. This is also the time when a bunch of other cults were really thriving. So yeah, I was born into it. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, so they have one there. And then when I was 5 years old, they moved my family over to one in the lower mainland of BC in Canada. We did live in Vancouver for a little while, but that one was pretty short-lived. And there are so many groups around Canada and North America and the entire world. So yeah, all of my current family who was in the group, including my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, have all left. After you leave the group, you are excommunicated. So you are no longer able to contact people from the group. If you have friends and family inside of the group, you are not allowed to have contact with them. So that was a big portion of the reason why a lot of my family left, because, after some time, your family's moved on, you can't see them anymore, you're really wondering what's going on out there. The group does make it incredibly hard to leave in the sense that you do not have any financial earnings of your own. Everything that you make goes back into the group. So if you were to leave, you would essentially be leaving with nothing, which is what my family did. My parents, after some really horrible things happened to their children, that I will not get into, they decided this is too much. So in the middle of the night, they packed up their 4 kids, and we quite literally just got to a tent at a campsite, and we were there for a while. Even from a very young age, I was able to see a lot of the cracks in the belief system of this cult. For example, they have a lot of really homophobic, really racist, and sexist views that were incredibly prominent, very, very, very prominent. And not something my family fucked with, to be honest. When they have weddings, the woman will always just tell the man about how she is his and how she's just an embodiment of him. And there's even a line that I'm remembering from weddings where women will say that they will, I think it's give their head to the man, when he needs, if his head is cut off or whatever. It's so fucking far-fetched and out there. I don't understand genuinely, but I saw that as a massive red flag even as a 5-6 year old.
Although people from the group would not explicitly say that they have racial biases, there are a lot of racial biases that are thrown into the system and that people perform daily that made it incredibly difficult for me as a child coming out of that group to be able to recognize my own biases. So that was definitely something that I had to take into account after, and I had to unlearn a lot of things that I had been taught, whether I was conscious about it or not. They also teach you that the outside world is literally like the devil's world. Like everybody is out to hurt you. Nobody wants your well-being. Kindness and positivity is like not a thing in the real world. It's that the only things that can thrive are within the group. So that's how they keep a lot of people in there. Although there was a multitude of reasons for my parents making the decision for our family to leave the group, it was definitely a very challenging decision. It was all that they ever knew and what they grew up with. So to unlearn everything is incredibly difficult and something I am very thankful that they made the choice to do. The ultimate decision was made, though, because they wanted a better life for their children. And as I mentioned, some really, really horrible things happen to children in that group. And you can look it up. There's lots of things about it. But yeah, it's not a great environment. So my parents had experienced a lot of that when they were growing up. They were in multiple raids from police because children were seized from their parents when a lot of things were found out that was happening within the group. And my parents really just didn't want to see this happen to us as children. So they made the decision that I am like forever grateful for to leave. Although after leaving the group, it's not really easy to get a kickstart on life when you have 4 children and you don't have like a driver's license or you don't have like any form of an income, any real job experience. Like it's incredibly difficult. My parents hadn't had schooling past the grade 6. So it made it incredibly challenging for both of them to get jobs, but I am forever grateful that they did.
I have been hearing so much about the 12 tribes lately. They tend to hang out in places that have national parks. They are very prominent around the Appalachian Mountains. They tend to prey on backpackers and transient style people. There are so many good YouTube videos about this cult. I'll leave some below. One that I really loved was by the YouTuber Kyle Hates Hiking, where he actually went to the Yellow Deli and stayed at the hostel and experienced the whole thing for himself.